4 PC builds, that's what we're going to take a look at the $400 price point. The more money we add to these builds, the more we have to take a look at. And one of the biggest things we're going to be taking a look at is exactly which CPU and GPU you should use for this build. Stick around, you're not going to want to miss this one. 4 different processors for 4 different gaming PC builds at the $400 price point. I really couldn't figure out how to tackle this other than to show you all of these together and then allow you the opportunity to vote on which one you think is your favorite. On the one end of the spectrum, we've got the Intel Pentium G3258. You only spend $70 on your CPU, so you have more for your entire build, and you still have a great overclocker, great single-threaded performance. And then you've got a CPU like the FX 8320E, 8 cores, great overclocker. And then you can either choose to go with a Skylake or a Haswell i3. On the one hand, the Skylake CPU is a little bit more expensive and is going to force you to upgrade to the newer technology, where the Haswell will stick with DDR3. So, which one are we going to tackle and which one do we think is best? I'm going to let you vote for it. But for now, let's go over some of the performance things that I was thinking about. All right, so like my other videos, I like to bring in an article that I think gives a lot of value to this video, and the one I want to focus on for this video is TechSpot's article that shows what the best CPU for the money is, and specifically it shows the FX 8320E side by side with the Skylake i3-6100 and the Haswell i3 and the i3-4360. That's not the specific CPU I plan on using for these builds, but this should give us a very good idea in terms of performance. They put the GTX 960 here with an overclocked FX 8320E at 4.6 gigahertz, as you can see at the top here. And then when it's not overclocked, obviously not performing as well, because you're not going to get as good of single-threaded performance out of the FX 8320E as you will even out of the Pentium G3258. So that's important to remember. If you're not planning on overclocking the FX 8320E, then you might suffer some performance dips in pretty much every single game compared to any of these other CPUs, even the less expensive one and the G3258. However, if you do a lot of rendering and if you're an overclocker, then it's probably the one to get. On the other hand, if you want faster everyday performance and you don't do a lot of rendering, a CPU like the i3-6100 makes a lot of sense. But if you're going to go with Skylake, do you have to upgrade to DDR4? Is that going to cost more? These are all the kind of things that we're going to talk about. Or should you stick with a Haswell CPU and something like the 4360 or the 4170? Moving on here, as you can see, these benchmarks are going to change substantially. And really, the FX 8320E performed really well in that first game, but as we go on here, you can see it's not the clear-cut winner. So keep that in mind. And whenever we look at CPUs, that should be the number one thing that you're doing is looking at different benchmarks that make a lot of sense. Here in Hitman Absolution, the i3-6100 is the clear-cut winner here, even over an overclocked FX 8320E. So if your main focus is performance in games, I would venture to say that the i3-6100 is probably the route to go. Whereas the FX 8320E, you'll have to keep it overclocked. You might have to get a pretty decent motherboard and a pretty decent aftermarket cooler to keep it at that 4.6 gigahertz at all times. Moving on to other games like Battlefield 4 and Thief, there's a lot of meat in this article. So be sure to check out the description below if you want a link directly to it. I'll put this as well as other useful articles right there. The next thing we're going to look at is graphics cards in the $130 to $150 price range, and 2 stick out to me. That would be the GTX 950 and the R7 370. And I'm going to put a link to this as well in the description. Digital Foundry does some great work in terms of comparing different CPUs and GPUs on their YouTube channel, and I highly recommend you guys go there when you're comparing and doing benchmarks. This specific video, they compare the R7 370 with a GTX 960 and a 950, both at standard and overclock. And in general, you'll get more performance out of that GTX 950. Now, a GTX 950 is just a cut back 960, but you know what? If you can find it in that $130 to $150 range, it's still going to be a much better deal than the R7 370. So across the board here, my recommendation is going to be that GTX 950, which we were able to find for this month at $130. All right, so I'm just going to push everything else out at you at once. just to shorten this video so you guys don't have to listen to me go on and on and on about these builds. But the main thing that I want from this is for you guys to go to the description below and vote on your favorite one of these builds on my website. So at first we have a $396 G3258 build. Of course, you can get the G3258 for $49.99 at Micro Center. Things are always just a little bit cheaper there, especially CPUs. If you've got one near you, then great. But I don't count that in my price. In my price, I'm counting it as about $70 from Amazon. As you can see, a lot of the parts of each of these PC builds are going to be the same. The Corsair Vengeance 2x4 gigabyte RAM is $35 at Newegg this month. I'm using that in the 3 builds that use DDR3 memory. The Fractal Design Core 1100, that's the micro ATX case I'm going to use on the 3 Intel builds. The AMD build is actually not a micro ATX build because of the motherboard. So for that, we're going to be using the Thermaltake Versa H21 at Newegg, which is $20 right now off. So right there, it's $25, whereas on Amazon or other places, it's $50. So extremely good deal there. We're going to stick with the EVGA 430 watt power supply here. And I know that I sound like a broken record when talking about this power supply. It's nothing spectacular, but it's the best we can get in this type of builds. Moving on towards more expensive builds, we'll worry about, getting a higher tiered power supply from the list of the best power supplies for the money that we have on the website and things like that. So if you're concerned about that power supply, I just think that at this price point, it still makes a lot of sense. All right, moving on to the i3-4170 build for around $415. It can be around $400 if you have a Micro Center near you and you can get the i3-4170 for $100. But hey, that's a privilege, not a guarantee for most of us. The Asus GTX 950 is $20 off to make it $128.99 at SuperBiz this month. Pretty fantastic deal. In fact, I actually started out making this build with the R7 370 simply because I didn't think I was going to get a GTX 950 to fit in any of these price ranges, but it's pretty fantastic that it does. Moving on to the FX 8320E, you can get the FX 8320E at NCIX US for $123. Pretty darn good deal. Now, one concern I do have with this build, probably the same concern that you have, is that we're using the stock cooler. So if we got the Hyper 212 Evo, that'd be another $25, and then we'd have to change this to be more like a $500 build. So you're going to have to get the overclock that you can with the FX 8320E. Again, I'm only going to recommend that to people that are heavy multitaskers, do a lot of rendering, things like that. Otherwise, I think that one of these other processors is probably the way to go. And we're going to couple that with the MSI 970A. We're using a 970 chipset motherboard because it's less expensive, and usually you can get some pretty good deals out there. Might have to flash the BIOS or do some tweaking to get the kind of overclock that you're looking for. And now moving on to the Skylake build, there's really 2 routes you can go here because you can do Skylake without DDR4. In fact, there's a secondary option here in the Asus H110M-A, which allows you to use DDR3 memory. The thing about that is that I couldn't get as cheap of a motherboard there, so it was almost made more sense to upgrade to DDR4 if you were completely making the new build. And for that, I chose the Gigabyte GA-110M-A, which is only $44 on Amazon.com. I know that they're trying to get it back in stock, so you might have to look around for that if it's not in stock on Amazon. But overall, I think these are 4 solid builds, and you could really make a case for each one of them. Again, I'd love to know what you think. Don't forget to go to the description below before this video is over and vote for which of these builds that you think is best. All right, that wraps up those 4 $400 PC builds, but I do recommend that you go to our website. I've got so much more information here that you guys can check out on these $400 gaming PC builds. I just go into a little bit more depth. Anytime you guys listen to the video and you're really interested in what I'm saying or you think it has something to offer, then go to the website and you'll find additional information, additional links. I try to add everything I can. As you can see, here's that comparison of the GTX 950 and the R7 370. But also, if you want to spend a little bit less money on the graphics card and really get all of these builds into that $400 price range, there's a comparison here of the 750 Ti and the R7 360. Again, don't forget to vote on which of these builds you think is the best. Also, to support me, you can like and subscribe this video and just leave a comment. I love the comments. I love that even when you guys want to troll me and leave hate. I'm sicker than a dog today. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I'm still here for you today. Still going to plan on making the other 6 to 7 videos that we have for this week and releasing them, because you know what? I really want to get these out for December, which I think is the best month for building a PC. Hope you guys are having a great day, and we'll see you next time.